Hello everyone and welcome to this special live recording of Beyond Queer Politics. My name is Remy Bonny. I'm the Executive Director of Forbidden Colors and I'm delighted to be recording today's episodes here at the Deutsche Welle's Global Medium Forum in Bonn. For those who don't know the podcast yet, Beyond Queer Politics explores how politics, democracy, media and power shapes the lives of LGBTIQ+ people across Europe. We look beyond the headlines and ask what is really happening underneath the political debates that are affecting our communities. And I can't think about a more appropriate place to do this today than having this conversation at the Global Media Forum. Because when we talk about democracy, we often talk about elections, institutions, courts, political parties, but democracy also depends on something else. The ability of people to tell stories, to be visible, to challenge power, and to access independent information. And that is exactly why attacks on journalists, independent media, and queer voices matter so much. Across Europe, we are witnessing increasing efforts to silence, marginalize, or intimidate LGBTIQ+ communities, sometimes through legislations, sometimes through political pressure, sometimes through disinformation campaigns, and sometimes through media capture that gradually pushes certain voices out of public debate. Today we are going to focus on two countries that have become important case studies over the last years. Our guests are coming from Hungary and from Poland, and we'll discuss how hostile political environments affect journalism, what happens when queer voices become political targets, and why media and LGBTIQ+ rights ultimately are part of the same democratic struggle. So I'm very pleased to be joined by two exceptional guests. First, Klementyna Suchanow. Klementyna is a Polish writer, journalist and researcher who has become one of the leading experts across the world on the transnational anti-rights, anti-gender movements. Through her investigations, she has exposed how anti-democratic and anti-LGBTIQ+ actors cooperate across borders to undermine rights and democratic institutions. And she is also widely known as one of the key figures behind the Polish women's strike movement, which mobilized millions of people in defense of the rights to access abortions, safe and free abortion. And joining us from Hungary, from Budapest, is Noemi Martini. Noemi is a Budapest-based journalist working for HVG. HVG? Yes, I've lived for 1 year in Hungary, so I've tried to learn a little bit. One of Hungary's leading independent news magazines, she reports on social issues and Hungarian politics as part of HVG's video reporting team, and authors a bi-weekly newsletter that examines political developments in the country from a feminine perspective. Klementyna, Noemi, thank you both for joining us today. So I would like to start with a broad question. When international audiences think about Hungary and Poland, they often think about democratic backsliding, media freedom concerns, LGBT-free zones in the case of Poland, LGBT propaganda laws in Hungary. But both countries also recently went through seriously political shifts. So from your perspective, what does it look like, both before the political shift and right now, for our communities and for journalists on the ground right now? Klementyna?
Me starting. Hello. You probably read the news in recent years about Poland and how bad it was for not only women but LGBT also people, but journalists included and many others who were just independent thinking people. And it is a sense of relief in Poland since 3 years that we had a change of power. And for me, it was a big relief because as an activist, I was under lots of pressure, hate, and all those operations that we know. And we were waiting for the new government to change certain things. However, they don't have majority like in Hungary, so they are restricted by the veto of the president, who used to be far right, and the new one is again a far right, and even worse than the previous one. And so there are certain things that should be happening, and we've been waiting for, like abortion rights or like law about partnership, same-sex partnership, but they are not happening. Because the coalition also has a part of conservative people, the coalition that's governing, and plus the president who's stopping things. Of course, this provokes lots of stress among us and question marks about the future and whether we should be supporting this government or not. But I mean, at stake there's something more than just our rights, so sometimes we are withholding because we know that at the end of it it's about a democracy, and once we lose this, we lose everything, not only this but much, much more. So this is like a strange situation when we know that we should be still protesting actually and still fighting for our rights, but this could be taken as a like a damaging factor for democracy, in fact. So there's a kind of sense like in questions, what should we be doing in this moment? You are in a better position because you have the constitutional majority, so you can maybe push things further and with more courage. So tell us, how is it in Hungary?
Yeah, exactly. This is the first time that I'm abroad talking about Hungary where I don't feel that sort of crippling shame that I used to when I was talking to people outside of my country. People always, you said you're Hungarian, and people were like, oh, I'm so sorry. And now it's a little bit different, but now everyone is like, everyone is watching you and you're the hope, and it's actually a very privileged position. I'm here as an ally. Adam, an activist, was supposed to be here, but he got ill, and so I feel very honored that he asked me to sit in for him, because I truly think that the journalism that I do, which is kind of rooted in feminism, I think it should be intersectional, and I think that nobody is free until everybody is free. So this is something we could really see in Hungary. First they come for the LGBTQ people, then they come for women's rights, then they come for journalists. So this is like a sort of playbook of autocracy that happened in Russia, that's happening in Georgia, it was happening in Poland as well, and in Hungary. You asked about the situation on the ground right now. I would say that everybody is a little bit like PTSD and trying to just kind of process what was happening. I think when you come out of that oppression, that's when you realize how oppressed you were. And I think it's almost, even more difficult to be so cheerful, because I'm so sad for all the lost time. I'm so sad for all the people that were oppressed on a daily basis. And so we have a 2/3 majority. The new government, TISA party, has 2/3 of majority in the Hungarian parliament, so they can pass pretty much any law that they want. There have been many promises regarding human rights and restoring democracy, but legally speaking, there are still some laws in effect that are really oppressive of female bodies, female healthcare, and LGBTQ plus people. So I think I'm hopeful, but I'm kind of waiting to see what will happen. And I'm also waiting to see what will happen to journalists on the field, because it has been in the campaigning period leading up to the April elections, there were some like physical attacks on journalists, me personally as well. So it's gotten really bad. And so I'm hoping that also, again, legally, there could be some steps made to promise that it will not happen again.
Yeah, and I remember actually in both countries for a very long time, it was, I won't call it soft measures, but it definitely were soft measures where the people close to the government were acquiring media companies, but also journalists were telling me behind the scenes that they are doing self-censorship. So can you talk a little bit more about that? Because in a sense, until, for instance, Orban in 2021 banned so-called LGBT propaganda, speech itself was not really being regulated yet in the countries, but journalists were definitely already feeling the pressure coming from the government.
Oh yeah, there was a lot of that in Poland, and the situation was critical, I would say. I was never silent, so it's not my case, but I could see that many people were withdrawing, like in private life. that I shouldn't stand out because then there's a price you pay, like with your health or family issues or money issues, or there was always something. But there was also the other side of the story, lots of journalists getting into corruption, in fact, getting prizes, or being invited to the governmental conferences, things like that, which at that time was like a clear signal of support for them, because you should say, first of all, I withdraw from politics because I'm a journalist and I should be independent. But then with this government, it meant even more. So, and we still deal with it because those journalists who went into corruption, who allowed themselves to be corrupted, they are now trying to destroy the democratic side, and they are putting many obstacles, and in the research they are focusing on the issues that are damaging the image of the current government, but never touching the issues of the previous government, of things that they are still doing, so that they do it in a very populist way, of course. They have big outlets because they've been pumped with money for years. And they have a strong voice. They reach the young audience. And, they corrupt the minds this way. And we are a year before next elections, parliamentary elections in Poland. And this campaign already has started. And I'm not getting into details to tell you stories that are happening right now. But there is a lot of that. So it's not that they've been corrupted, but they pay back for the money they received or for some privileges, and they go on with this agenda because they feel like they are already ashamed. There's no place actually for them in the independent market, and they need to continue their living, so they do it. And this is it was never crushed so much as in Hungary, the media. So still there were independent voices, but we all paid a huge price for it.
I think in Hungary, politics and the media really helped to spread the homophobic message in the past couple of years. The public service broadcasting was completely a propaganda to the government, and a majority of independent newsrooms were bought up by sort of mini oligarchs linked to the government. And I think that, they really played and helped each other. So, yes, they, first of all, in parliament, on a, legal level, they made legislations that sort of banned I think it was called the popularizing of LGBTQ topics, and they based it on child protection laws. This is, again, something that they do in many other dictatorships. So it's not very creative. This is what they do. And then the propaganda media helped to kind of get this message to every level of society, because especially the smaller newsrooms and the print newspapers in the countryside were all brought up by oligarchs, so it was like 100% propaganda. I think that one of the big sort of sin of the previous government was that they created this term of LGBTQ propaganda, and they made it look like if you speak about this topic, then it can be only propaganda. You're trying to influence people. You're trying to sort of serve some other bigger sort of goal, which is not how it is. And I think it's important to use words correctly, because talking about sexual minorities or any identity who is a minority is not a propaganda, because we're not trying to get any sort of political party's agenda within that discussion. And so because of that, it was also, for us independent journalists, was even more difficult to talk about these topics, because anything that was about this topic, people could say, oh, that's propaganda. And so it was really like this sort of this created this barrier, and so now we're waiting to see what happens with the public service media. They are passed the new media laws in Hungary, so there's some hope, but we have to see what people they put in the leading positions. And we have Pride this weekend, so it will show how many people will turn up this year after the elections. I'm very interested.
Yeah, and I mean, we've mentioned it already. In Poland, we had these LGBT-free zones. We had several hostility campaigns by the previous government against our communities. Well, Hungary has this so-called LGBT propaganda law, which is a copy-paste of Russia's anti-LGBTQ plus propaganda law. Let's name them in here. It's important, I think. Yeah, banned Pride, and this weekend it's going to be the first time ever, the first time since Orban is gone, that Pride will happen legally again in Hungary. So one thing that really strikes me is that these attacks on independent media and LGBTIQ plus communities always happen simultaneously. Why do you think that authoritarians, or so-called illiberal political actors, see both journalists and queer people so much as a threat?
Oh, if it was only about those two groups, but it's many groups. In fact, in Poland, they targeted women first. And then came time for LGBT. But when it was our turn in 2016, we knew that this is just the beginning and this is going to be continued on probably other groups too. So we formed this grassroots movement that was called Polish Women's Strike. And we knew that we have to maintain it, not only for ourselves, but to protect other groups who will be immediately attacked after us. And this is going on, you know, you saw LGBT people, and then you saw judges, then you saw teachers, journalists, of course, and it's on and on. Immigrants, and then Ukrainian narrative is, anti-Ukrainian narrative is now. Anti-Semitic elements are always there, like it's going on and on. And it's just the way they govern, it's the autocratic playbook. You know, you need to find a threat, you need to find an enemy, to blame it, to expose it, and then you move on into another target when this is not working. So in 2015, for the elections, PiS won it with the anti-immigration narrative. And now, a year ago, for the presidential campaign, like 10 years later, they used it again, and again it worked for them. So, you know, it can be recycled years later. It's just the way the populists, the autocrats mobilize their voters.
Yeah, it's scapegoating, basically. Yeah.
It's exactly the same in Hungary. So I don't want to repeat again the same thing, but yes, I think Viktor Orbán even spoke about this, that for him, this is a political strategy. You have to create an enemy, and then you have to tell the people that I will protect you from the enemy. And sometimes there is an actual enemy, like sometimes there's a war or some like, you know, actual threat, but sometimes there isn't such thing, and then you have to find something. And this sort of obsession with, you know, normalcy, I think it's similar what is happening in the US since Trump, you know, even the first term of Trump's election, when they started using the word woke as a negative term as opposed to the normal people. And this is what's happening in Hungary as well. And one other thing I think that is important to understand this whole thing is that when they create an enemy and they say they will protect you from it, they also create these divisions of like, they are not normal, we are normal. But it's also, you know, minorities are always getting attacked, whether you're a woman, whether you're queer, whether you're an immigrant.
Women are not a minority. That's the thing, that they chose a wrong enemy,
Yes.
which mobilized more than half of the country. So that was the mistake that I cannot understand still why they did it this way, in this order.
But I think it's rooted in this sort of male superiority of the Hungarian government, because leading up to the elections for 2 years, we had no female ministers, we had no women in government. And so everything was measured to this white male power that they had. And anybody else who was not that was stigmatized. But also, it's quite funny to say now, but some of the people who actually helped to write and push through these anti-LGBTQ laws were themselves gay people.
Yeah, that's unfortunately something that we see coming back basically everywhere where all these anti-LGBTQ plus measures are happening. One thing that we increasingly observe across Europe and frankly even beyond Europe is that attacks on independent media and LGBTQ plus communities often come from the same political actors. Journalists are accused of spreading propaganda, LGBTQ plus people are accused of spreading propaganda, independent media are portrayed as the enemies of the nation. LGBTQ plus organizations are not just the enemy of the nation, are often even portrayed as foreign agents. So Klementyna, you've spent years researching this so-called anti-rights movement internationally. To what extent is all of what we see happening on the ground coordinated? And are we simply seeing similar political tactics emerge independently, or is it really an ecosystem that is happening? I think the answer will already be my question, but yeah.
It's a large question, but of course it's coordinated, like no doubt. And I'm not bringing up the proofs for it, but there's already enough of it. And I would say that for the first phase, which started around 2010, 11, 12, up to like a few years ago, let's say up to the war in Ukraine, it was like densely infiltrated by the Russians who used to go to meet those guys. They were simply choosing the societies, organizations, people who were on the margins of our systems, like those radicals from the United States, anti-abortionists organizing, those protests by the clinics and so, and others like crazy nationalists dreaming about Hitler being back, things like that, which were there, but nobody really talked to them. And they invested in those guys, like under the radar guys, and they were growing with the Russian support as allies in those traditional values, cultivation, and with those narratives that we know everywhere. And now I would say after the break of the war, the start, the invasion of Russia in Ukraine, I see how those movements, including parties, are already enough to take it, absorb it, and to act on their own, however, still being somehow in touch, but it's more difficult for the Russians to control it because many of them are on sanctions, there are some issues and it's not convenient, but now there are other ways like Telegram channels and other like cryptocurrencies. So it's a different phase right now that the tactics of their behavior that I see are changing. And this investment was first into the Christian, like religious societies, at the same time into the nationalist organizations, which were growing into parties. Now the society is pumped enough, and the nationalist parties are, already there. In some cases, we have their members in the parliament, and in some places they are even winning today. And they are ready now to take it over. So we are at this culmination point, I would say, which is very dangerous for us. And we have to observe it and react and actually act actively, not waiting for what they do, but preventing things, being somehow more radical they are.
So, Noemi, from the Hungarian perspective, have you seen journalists and queer communities beginning to understand what they are facing as a common challenge? I remember last year when Budapest Pride, when Pride in general was banned, 300,000 people showed up on the street, so it became something much larger than just a protest for queer rights, it became an anti-government protest. Is this something that is also seeing in the interactions you have between you as a journalist and the queer community?
I think one of the really interesting thing, and I think one of the keys of why there was such a landslide victory at the elections and why Hungarian society managed to sort of get rid of the Orbán government was the fact that Hungarians learned and understood how to use their anger. I think political anger is something that I think journalists and the queer community especially felt really angry about how the country is governed. But for a long time, I think it mostly just made us really depressed and almost unable to act on it anymore, because there were so many protests and then everybody went home and nothing happened. And what happened now with Pride, which was the biggest Pride ever in Budapest, was that people understood that we need to channel our anger into action that is different than before. We need to come together. And this is actually very hard to do, because sometimes in society there are people who support independent journalists, but maybe because of religious reasons, that happens a lot in Hungary, they don't support queer rights. And even within sometimes the feminist movement, there are divisions between, certain issues. So it was always really difficult to bring everybody together. And this time, last year at Pride, so many people came. There were people there who were like far-right political supporters. There were religious people. Everybody came because everybody said, I don't care about all those other issues and arguments that we have. We have one goal together, because this government is oppressing everybody. And this is, I think, a very powerful thing that could happen. Especially because the new Prime Minister, Péter Magyar, never said a word about Pride, never said a word about the queer community. He didn't encourage people to go to Pride. He said, I'm doing my thing, you guys take care of it. And society actually managed to come together. And I forgot your initial question.
I think you very much answered my initial question, honestly. I think what you also show here is something very hopeful, is that whenever society comes together and sets our differences apart, we can fight together as a society for something that is bigger than all of us, and that is the perseverance of democracy itself. And with these hopeful words, I would also like to ask you, Klementyna, as my last real question, what hope do you see in the case of Poland then for the future?
Oh, it's not the right time to talk about hope. I had hope 3 years ago when the government changed, and now I'm losing it. So I am afraid, rather, right now that the further far right than the before far right, than previous far right, is going to win next elections because of many mistakes that are being made by the current government, and the mobilization of the people is being lost. So my only hope, if I think of hope, is the youth. We had a beautiful moment at the time of our protests around 2020-21. As a women's movement, we used, of course, the word feminist, but the name of the movement was with the word women, which was more encompassing, enlarging. And there was lots of youth with us on the streets, underage many times. So it was a beautiful coalition, LGBT people, of course, queer people, like everybody. So that was that platform on which we built what you said as unity. And I saw those young guys, how they started being politicized by the circumstances. And I feel that they are the only ones, and I see them today. I saw them on the streets being like 17 years old. Now they are 24, let's say. And I see them, after the studies, graduated, and how they are getting into different streams of life, like into journalism or politics or different things. And I see those faces sometimes at some meetings, and this is giving me lots of joy, because they've been educated in a beautiful unity on the street level, from the bottom, and now they are getting into the stream, into the bloodstream of our country, and they'll be changing it. So I hope that one day we'll be gone with those old guys like Kaczynski. Tusk is also old, and I think it's time for younger generations.
Well, there is nothing better than democratic education, that is education actually on the ground by protesting, I would say. Thank you both, and then we would like to open also the floor to the audience. You have to walk through to the microphone there.
So I was wondering whether there was the same type of coordination at the level of civil society between Hungary and, say, in the US, that there was the political level. We heard a lot about like American right-wing extremist politicians going to Hungary to learn from Orban. Did that happen at other levels, and particularly, for example, among the LGBTQI movement?
Maybe I start, because you say US people were learning, but first it was Polish people coming to Budapest to learn. And I heard of a meeting between Kaczynski and Orban somewhere in the south of Poland, and it was at the beginning of the ruling. So yeah, Budapest was the hub to give instructions that are the Kremlin's playbook. So they were like the proxies for Russia to instruct others, including US.
Well, I would hope that now we can be a different blueprint for something else. But I think, I personally hope that now all those people who used to come to Hungary, even the Trumpists and the Kaczynski people and the far right of US and Europe, I hope they will come again to Hungary and watch it for themselves, what's going to happen to them, and learn that if they keep doing what they're doing, like, this is what's going to happen. And I don't want to go into the nitty-gritty of Hungarian politics right now, but it really is like a system that is built, and you think it will never go away. From one day to another, it completely collapsed. Viktor Orban is completely disappeared. He refused to sit in parliament. He's nobody from one day to another. And so I think this is how these men will fall the same way. And I think this is what they should be looking at as an example. And this is what, any other community should look at as an example.
Yeah, maybe to add to that, from this coalition building from a, let's say, more progressive point of view, obviously that's something that we've been trying to do for many years. But obviously also we need to add to that, it's often David versus Goliath in financial sense. Because if we put together the budgets of the 3 largest anti-gender organizations in the world, that's as much as the 700 largest LGBTIQ plus organizations in the world. There is one anti-gender think tank funded by Viktor Orban. It's called the MCC, which has also a big cluster department in Brussels. They received an endowment of 1.3 billion euros. The largest LGBTIQ plus organization has an annual budget of 2 million euros.
So we talked about instructions and learning, training that was coming from Budapest, but also lots of money was coming from Budapest to Poland. And recently I was studying a case of a different institution. However, MCC is also, this is Matthias Corvinus Collegium. And I was studying the Central European Academy, which is for lawyers. And there was a strong collaboration between Polish and Hungarian lawyers. And now this is expanding into Europe and the world. And they had lots of money. And I'm giving you an example of this kind of corruption. And this is the people, those people, the lawyers, Polish lawyers that used to go to Budapest, they are the ones who dismantled the system. Some of them are the Supreme Court judges. And so, for example, for a conference or a publication, they used to receive 15,000 euro, starting with 15,000 euro, up to 40,000 euro for like nothing. If you are from the academic world, you know how much you can be paid for a publication, not much. And it's never 15,000 euro. Even if you are an author of a very good book, it's like not always possible to get such a sum. So this is how they've been pumped financially. This is not an idealistic mission they are on. No, they are making careers and they are making living on it.
these organizations are being shut down and they're not going to get any more funding. So yeah, so that there's hope, especially the
But
ones
there
that
was
are
a
getting.
special construction of funds created over the institutions, public institutions, educational institutions, and there was something written in those contracts that they will be provided with the money for the next 15 years. Is this redone?
Yes, they are passing laws now, and like the new
yes.
government is very strict about it. So the institution itself, for example, MCC, is not going to be closed, but the what's the name? Like the company behind it, or it's a foundation. The foundation behind it will not be getting the money anymore that it did before, and they had to change laws, and they just passed it like I think this week. So yeah, it's happening.
Maybe to end this on a less positive note, in that case, we've been seeing that obviously the US administration of Trump is now going to try to fill in the gap that is being created. We've seen that an Undersecretary of State Department in December has been traveling all around Europe to meet with anti-gender organizations, to give grants to them and so on. So in the near future, we assume, that's what our partners in DC are also telling us, that the money that is now frozen of US aid is going to be redirected into programs attacking our communities and what they call so-called defense of free speech. One of the big focus points right now in Brussels is that we see anti-gender organizations hiring lobbyists to fight against the so-called against the Digital Services Act, which is obviously a very important act for our community because it's regulating hate speech on large online platforms. So we see that the US is really attacking these kind of issues right now.
Yeah, because it started with Russia, it went through Hungary, and now US is in Kremlin's hands. And this is another proxy country right in the government for them.
I think we should really underline that Hungary was really a Trojan horse for the Russian Federation inside the European Union, and that a lot of the council decisions.
Now they are looking for another one, and they hope Poland would be.
Or
Yes.
Slovakia, Bulgaria. The list is unfortunately not getting shorter. So. Unfortunately, we're not ending with a very hopeful note, but I think it's with a wake-up call towards all of us. So this is all the time we have. Klementyna Suchanow, Noemi Martini, thank you both for sharing your insights and experiences with us today. And thank you to everyone here at the Global Media Forum in Bonn for joining this live recording of Beyond Queer Politics. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe to Beyond Queer Politics on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and any other major podcast platform. Until next time, thank you for listening.